evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming out in this miserable weather. Those that didn't come, we appreciate it, but those that stayed home can certainly be watching it. Is it live? Yes, on TV?
Yep.
So it's live on TV. We're just going to be going over the warrants for the special town meeting for next week, October 18th. There'll be no votes or anything taken tonight. There'll just be a presentation. Our select board members will, just like we were at the select board at the town meeting, we will be going over each article. And so I will start it off with David Nixon, and we will have, I don't see a moderator here this evening, so I guess I'm going to wing it this evening. So David's going to be doing the FY19 budget, and this needs a 2/3 majority vote.
Good evening. Good evening. The first article is the plan adjustment to the FY19 budget that we passed at the annual town meeting. In general, we're accomplishing 4 things with this budget adjustment. First, we're providing a COLA, the cost of living increase for the non-union personnel, 2% COLA. Technical difficulties, please stand by. There we are. Okay. All right, so 2% cost of living adjustment is provided for the non-union employees. The second adjustment to the budget is the union contracts have all been settled, so those pay increases and other expenses are incorporated into the budgets. The third is housekeeping adjustments, such as the Conservation Commission budget and the building maintenance budget. These are housekeeping issues, mistakes that we passed at the annual town meeting that need to be addressed. And then the final adjustment is the information and bills that came in after annual town meeting, such as workers' compensation and our property and liability insurance. Those bills came in higher than we had expected. This budget is balanced and it preserves all the services that we committed ourselves to at the annual town meeting. So Article 2 establishes a new revolving fund for the Park and Recreation Commission. They're taking over the after-school program that formerly was administered by Hadley Kids Incorporated. And so the fees for that program are going to cover all the planned expenses. There's no impact upon the tax rate for this article, and this just establishes a new function for the Park and Rec Commission. We'll have a follow-up article at the annual town meeting in 2019 having to do with further business that we need to conduct with Hadley Kids Incorporated.
So I have fund balances, and that's Article 3. To see if the town will vote to transfer the following balances from prior town meeting articles. That's basically a housekeeping thing that we're doing also. This is a housekeeping article that does 2 things. Its first purpose is to clean up old balances left over in a number of articles where the project is done and any money remaining is unproductive. Funds are being returned back to the source from which they were appropriated. The second purpose is to amend an old borrowing authorization where borrowing was approved, but the amount actually needed was less. When we have excess borrowing in these articles, we are required to report annually to the Massachusetts Department of Revenue and the Federal Securities Exchange Commission any unproductive balances. There is no impact on taxes. So the summary of transfers are capitalization, $22,300.52. Water reserves, $4,700. Sewer reserves, $4,700. Sewer impact account, $744.20. And the Community Preservation Act, $83,500. Excess borrowing adjustment, $220.06. And Article 4 will be done by David Hill.
So Article 4 is to see if the town will transfer from sewer impact fees $80,000 to sewer reserves. In essence, this replenishes the $80,000 that we're taking from sewer reserves this past summer when we found emergency repairs along Route 9 that were needed to be done. The good news is we saved a significant amount of money by catching them in time, but now we're just transferring that money back to cover those expenses. And Christian has the next one.
All right, Article 5 is just to transfer free cash into the capital stabilization fund. We can read there, the current balance in capital stabilization is $5,759, and this transfer, in addition to transfer from Article 3, increases it to $58,011. Any questions on Article 5? Article 6 is our capital stabilization or capital purchasing article. A bunch of things here. Some are paid in cash, some are pulled out of reserves, and then some are borrowed upon, and 2 of the items will require a vote, and I can kind of go through them all. So, depend on what we look at, but appraisal software, evidence locker, or appraisal of software is for the assessor's office, evidence locker in the police department, and a compensation classification plan review by the select board, all would be paid out of capital stabilization. The highway garage repair comes out of water and sewer reserves. Sewer line assessment, which is an ongoing program to monitor our sewer lines in town, comes out of sewer reserves. Water tank access and clearing, that comes out of the water reserve fund. Callahan Well #1 reconditioning comes out of the water reserve fund. There are relocation expenses for Hadley Media once the Hooker School is torn down for the library and senior center projects. That's $15,000. There is HVAC, attic venting and dampers in the police and fire department, the public safety complex. That would come out of capital stabilization. Reserve for a town hall staff vehicle is $10,000. We would borrow that. That's within the levy. A cruiser for the police department, which is part of the ongoing replacement plan, would be borrowed within the levy. The skid unit for the fire department, which would go on the brush truck, is $31,000. That's a borrow, and that's within the levy. New Ford F-550 dump truck for the DPW highway division. That's $85,000. That's a borrow. That would be outside the levy, so that would require a vote to make that purchase. The Hopkins Academy cafeteria equipment replacement for the school department is also a borrowed article outside the levy, so that would require a vote to make that purchase. There is also Hopkins Academy and Hadley Elementary School health and security upgrades. It's a $98,000 borrow within the levy. And the final one is a council on aging van, and that's an $80,000 purchase borrowed within the levy. Any questions on any of that? Come on up to the mic. You can give us your name and address. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'm not good at these things, so I don't, my name's Cheryl Price, 27 Meadow Street.
Can you step up to the
Can you
mic?
just step up to the mic, please? We just can't hear you, I'm sorry.
There you go.
What was your name? I'm sorry.
Cheryl Price, 27 Meadow Street. And it, I mean, if you probably answer this easily, but I don't understand what's going on with the air conditioning unit at the safety complex. It seems like every year they're asking for a lot of money, like in 2016, they asked for $45,000. In the spring, they asked for $45,000. 45,000. I don't know if that's the same 45, is it? I'm sorry.
It's a different article. Would you like to come up and explain some about what's been going on? It's been an ongoing problem that they've been
Oh, I
trying to
know.
solve. I
Well,
can,
and keep in mind, the building is 20 years old,
Right.
Yeah.
and it wasn't done properly to begin with, so
Well,
we're
I
running
know,
into
I know
problems.
that. That's why I said you probably can answer quickly, but it was like I saw 45,000 in 2016, you have 45,000 in the spring, and now 27,000 now, and it's like, well, when does it end?
yep.
Mrs. Chunglo summed it up appropriately, where the building is over 20 years old. Last year, we required a replacement of the air conditioning unit, and we have discovered this year that there's inadequate venting in the building, so we are experiencing some condensation problems within the building, and this next project should deal with that problem appropriately.
Any-
Tim Nyhart, Building Commissioner. The town hall staff car. This has been an ongoing issue with me for quite a number of years. It's always being put off, it's always being changed and reduced considerably. I've been using used cars since the inception of town employees having cars. I had gone to you guys a couple of years ago because we knew that the car that I purchased out of my own budget was in very bad shape. And we didn't think it was going to make it, and unfortunately it did not make it, didn't pass inspection. So the issue was what to do. I had my own personal car for a few months until we could put together another car from DPW. It has been in, and it has been consistently been in as a new car. And it keeps on being taken out. I don't want to argue this point, but I think, come on, guys. We bring in a lot of money in inspection services. It was all agreed upon before to get a car for me and then pass it over to the DPW later on. I'm just asking for some consideration on this. It's been way too many years going back and forth with this.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
what I was gonna say is we could, I agree with you, this is what we could afford within the levy right now. So we could put it up for a vote, a larger sum, possibly, or we could wait until the town meeting and try to, we kind of bookmarked it here in case something came up for auction, that 10,000. And I know that's an interim solution. I kind of feel like we should put it on the program like we do
It was
the
in
police
capital
cruisers.
It's been in capital, it's being taken out consistently every year.
But we're going to discuss this at next week's meeting. This meeting is not posted for us as a select board.
Okay.
This is just an informational meeting tonight, and I was having it put on the agenda for next week.
Thank you, I appreciate it. The first time I heard
I didn't
about it.
have a chance to
Oh,
say that.
yeah, I didn't hear that.
That's
Okay, yeah,
That's fine.
no.
Thank you, I
Thank you,
do
Tim.
appreciate the consideration, let's discuss it.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't find out about it until it's in print.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, and it was brought up to me by Mr. Waskevich last week, and I said I would put it on my agenda at the next meeting, but we can't discuss it, we can't vote on anything
Okay,
tonight.
I appreciate
so-
it.
I do have a comment on it, and I mentioned it at our last select board meeting,
Well, you missed the chance at the last one.
I know. It's been 4 or 5 years I've been going through this budget for this special town meeting, and I had noticed it was in there for $10,000 again. And over the past 6 years that I've been here, we passed over it 2 or 3 times, and the revenue that the electrical inspector and the building inspector bring into this town, there's absolutely no reason why we can't put $30,000 in there and purchase a new car, and we won't have to talk about it again for another 10 years, you know?
Or more, if you take
Or
care of
more,
it.
yeah.
You got a good mechanic? Maybe.
Anyone else? Any other questions? The next article was a CPA article. I don't know if anyone from the CPA is talking about that tonight, or are we?
Cemetery, do we have someone here from the cemetery already? Andy, you want to talk about that? Either one.
Hi, everybody. I'm Andy Morris Friedman, 45 Roosevelt Street, and the chair of the CPA committee. We have 4 CPA-related activities for town meeting. The first, I'll refer you back to Article 3, which is the transfer of $83,500 back to the Community Preservation Act, which was awarded in 2014 to do library wiring. Since the future of the library is unclear, we thought it was best that that money be returned, and any future use of that building can apply for a grant, more specific grant based on the building's new mission, well, once that clears up. So I just wanted to go back to that. The Community Preservation Act is a 3% surcharge on your property taxes. We currently have, including the article I just discussed, $1,973,755 available dollars. We received from the state $88,835, or a match of 33%. That's for the current fiscal year. Well, no, that was the state match. We also got interest income in addition. Okay, Article 7, $23,000 for the Hadley Cemetery Committee for preservation of the gravestones at Hockenham Cemetery. A restoration plan was paid for by a Hadley citizen. I believe it was over $5,000. And the cemetery committee has come for CPA money to implement that plan and to preserve the stones of the Hockenham Cemetery. You definitely check it out if you've never been there. Article 8 is $12,000 also to the cemetery committee to make a plan for the other burial grounds throughout the town. They're very historic, and it's been a long time since Fred Oakley was in charge and he was taking care of the cemeteries. We need to carry on his work. So that's a plan. Then the cemetery committee will come back to the CPA committee at a future date to get money to implement the plan. Finally, Article 9 is $26,000 for the North Hadley Congregational Church. This is their second CPA request. You should go down and check out the restoration efforts at the church. It's really pretty terrific. But of course, with any old building, when you start to work on one thing, you realize that there are other things that need to be repaired. And there's a roof restoration, which is critical to the preservation of the building. They're putting up $10,000, and they're asking for $26,000 from the Community Preservation Act. And that will be it. Any questions?
Is that a, sorry.
Yes. Otherwise, people can't hear you.
Okay, I know that they asked and bought $56,000.
Can you please come up to the microphone? Sorry.
Yes.
Andy, Mr. Relinquish.
Only because it's on television, so people need to hear it.
I know that, okay, Cheryl Prudis, 27 Meadows Street. I know that they got $56,000 for the first part of the restoration, and this is the second part. My question is, I read up on the Acton case. I don't know if you guys know about the church thing where they, did the restoration thing. And my question is, because their argument was also, churches are having a hard time raising money. And that's part of the reason why they come for money like this. What's going to happen in 5 years when the church needs painted again? And you know what I'm saying? It's like at some point they're going to have to do their own thing. Because we're not a maintenance organization, we're a restoration. I mean, we're helping with restoration. So, did they raise money? You said $10,000, right?
It's something that will have to go to vote for the town meeting to approve it. This has only been presented to the CPA.
Right, but it's also been approved by the whole board, the whole finance.
But it still
committee.
goes to town meeting.
I know, but
And it has to be approved at town meeting. So
But for
if
the-
you have an objection to what it is,
Right.
please come to town meeting next week so other people can hear it. And
I don't know if I have an objection so much is, I think people listen to what you guys say. So if you say, you all say you're for it, people are going to vote for it. And I think people deserve a little background in, you know, like I'd like to know that, you know, that they raised some money too, that they tried, maybe they couldn't, and that's why they came to us. But
Yeah, I think Andy can answer your question.
I had two questions, one about the Acton decision, and it relates to this particular grant, and then one about possible future grants to the church. So first, for the Acton decision, I'm trying to think of how to sum this up as quickly as possible. The Supreme Judicial Court said that there's a three-part test that public grants to active houses of worship have to pass. And we feel that these two grants pass that test, which is basically that it doesn't help with the mission of the church, it doesn't help preserve religious iconography, and it doesn't, the money isn't spent on the space where religious worship takes place. So, as far as I know, they don't hold services on the roof. So, in terms of the Acton decision, I think we're okay. In terms of your other question, the third time's not the charm. You know, so we helped them twice. I don't know if they'll come back for a third time. They might, in which case we will do the regular CPA process and see if the grant qualifies. In terms of the painting, there is a loophole in the CPA, because CPA money can't be used for maintenance, but it can be used for neglect. So our CPA committee sort of decided informally that we paint you once if the architectural details of the building were threatened. But the second time, that's maintenance. We would consider the second painting maintenance, whether it's the North Hadley Church or Town Hall or whatever it is. So does that answer that?
and maintenance is outside the scope.
Well, it's very fluid, you know. In Hadley, we like to do things by the book, so we try to follow the law. Other towns take more liberties.
Andy, my understanding that one of the important factors the last time CPA funds were approved was the fact that it was a historical building on a scenic byway, and that the funds were used specifically just for the front of the church and the steeple, basically. It wasn't used to, say, paint the rectory in the back or something along those lines. And in one of the... Correct, yeah. So basically it's for appearance's sake and for historic preservation's sake more than just maintenance or religious purposes.
No, that was, Andy just heard that.
David, do you want to do the cemetery committee flowers, please?
Hello, everyone. I'm Alan Weinberg. I'm the chairman of the cemetery committee for the town of Hadley. And Article 10, we are asking for the town to approve an article that will clarify and integrate the respective roles and responsibilities of the cemetery committee and the Department of Public Works. Currently, the cemeteries are operated in an informal collaborative arrangement, which has, for the most part, served the town well, but it's, at times, things have fallen off the table, primarily because the cemetery committees volunteer, and sometimes there are no volunteers. It's been somewhat spotty over the years. And it's not sustainable or professional to operate basically buildings and grounds of the town with an all-volunteer cemetery committee. There's two somewhat conflicting enabling legislations for both the DPW and the cemetery committee. In 1928, well, the cemetery committee's been operating in one form or another for almost 200 years. But in 1928, the town meeting approved or gave the cemetery committee primary responsibility for operating the cemeteries. In 2009, when the DPW was set up and we accepted that charter, there's the language in that 2009 legislation that the town approved gives the DPW authority over the cemeteries, although the language is somewhat ambiguous. So we've been basically since then operating informally. The DPW has been great helping us, but it's at times been a problem. So what we're trying to do is clarify what each, not abolishing the cemetery committee, but we're trying to clarify what the roles are. And what we're proposing is that the DPW, in accordance with the 2009 intent of the legislature, have the primary responsibility for operating the cemeteries. And the cemetery committee would be advisory, and we will assist DPW primarily with selling lots, answering questions from the public, doing research, helping with laying out the marking the graves, but for interment. But we would be more advisory and assisting, and the DPW would have the primary responsibility. Any questions? Yep.
Thank you. And the last article by the select board before the planning board has the last few. To see if the town will vote to amend, there's an article for relating to snow and ice removal from sidewalks by deleting section 218-5 in its entirety and placing it with the following section. This all came about because of the state putting sidewalks on Route 9 and basically in front of the business district from South Maple Street to down towards the Amherst Town line. And basically because they were petitioned by residents that lived down that end that they walked to the mall and they wanted to walk it safely on sidewalks. So the state, when they were reconfiguring the Route 9, they also put in sidewalks. Well, that puts a burden on our DPW department. We looked it up, and actually there was an old article that says that a sidewalk in front of your house should be taken care of, or actually there was their responsibility of the owners whose sidewalk ran in front of their house to remove the snow. Well, somehow over the years, our DPW department has been taking care of the sidewalks on West Street and Middle Street. So it's kind of hard to all of a sudden change that. And then we also have sidewalks on Route 9 from East Street now to the bridge. And those sidewalks were also put in by the state when they redid Route 9 from the center of town back to the bridge. So our DPW has been plowing those also. It's hard to keep them plowed on Route 9 because of the plowing that the state does, because every time they plow, they push the snow back onto the sidewalk. So some of our people that are on Route 9 find it a hardship to actually take care of it themselves, so we have been taking care of it. But we feel that the business owners from South Maple Street to the Amherst Town Line should be responsible for taking care of those sidewalks, since they want the patrons' business. Any questions? Bill, would you like to have it added at the planning board?
So, Bill Dwyer from the Planning Board. Let's see, starting off with Article 12. That is actually a petition article. And the thrust of the article is what you see here in the text is actually what already exists in the bylaw. But what the petitioners are actually trying to do is delete the last sentence of the existing bylaw, which basically says that roofs shall have the appearance of shingles. So alternately, we could have just said, take out the last sentence. It gets you to the same place. That arose out of the desire for the senior center to have a standing seam metal roof, where standing seam metal roofs are not allowed under the current bylaw. It's sort of a moot point because we understand that the senior center is no longer seeking and will not seek a standing seam metal roof going forward for cost reasons, but it's on the bylaw, or it's on the warrant. Any questions on that one? The next item, Article 13, goes on for quite a few pages, and this is the enabling bylaw that creates a structure for permitting adult use marijuana growth and sales in Hadley. As I think everyone knows, the state adopted legalization of adult use marijuana by a statewide ballot. Hadley participated in that ballot, voted overwhelmingly to authorize adult use marijuana. We have a moratorium in effect through the end of, through the 1st of November to allow us time to develop the bylaw. We're a little behind working on the bylaw. We are working from a prototype drafted by the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and it is similar to bylaws that are being adopted throughout the region with a few specific twists for Hadley. In turn, the prototype bylaw is based upon the regulations of the State Cannabis Control Commission, and those regulations were not issued in final form until very early summer. So it's been a bit of a push to get this pulled together. And I'll jump ahead. We also have an Article 16, which is in the alternative to extend the moratorium through the Springtown meeting, I think to June 1, if I'm remembering correctly. Yes. So only one of those bylaws will be taken up. We will discuss the adult use marijuana, depending on the reaction response to where we are with that at the moment. We may decide to pass that over and go to the moratorium. On the other hand, if we adopt the adult use article, we will pass over the moratorium article. So it's, in very broad terms, the bylaw will authorize cultivation in most parts of Hadley, except the residential district, which is a small district off of Huntington Road, about 4 streets up there where the houses are very close together. But in the agricultural residential district, which constitutes probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the area of Hadley, and in the business districts, cultivation will be allowed by special permit, and retailing will be allowed in the business districts by special permit. And other than that, there's a long series of definitions. We're working through setbacks. We had a number of people at our last planning board meeting that were motivated to come in because a potential cultivator had sent them a notice saying that he might be growing marijuana near their house. So it's interesting, drew a lot of people. We're learning a lot about it as we go forward. And I'm sure there'll be a interesting discussion about it. But I think we have a good basic framework here in the prototype bylaw. The bottom line, though, is that the State Cannabis Control Commission has, I think, only just issued its first 1 or 2 licenses. So even the communities that have adopted an adult use marijuana bylaw and have had it in effect for months have no more experience than we do in actually administering the bylaw and dealing with applications from licensees. They just aren't there yet.
On the cultivation bill, does that mean inside or outside?
Well, at the moment, we tried to structure it so that cultivation could be either inside or outside. As a practical matter, our bylaw is not the last word on this. The state cannabis control regulations are the last word, and the security requirements posed by the state regulations may make it functionally impractical for anyone to try to grow outside. One concern was odor, and there are areas in town where the houses are fairly spread out and the fields are fairly extensive, so that the odor of wild cannabis would, or field-grown cannabis, might not be an issue, whereas in other parts of town where the houses are closer together, even though they're in the same agricultural residential district, the odor could be an issue. At the moment, we have a no odor outside the facility or outside the premises section in the bylaw. Going into it, we thought Hadley of all places shouldn't prohibit outdoor growth, but on the other hand, as a function of the market, field-grown cannabis is a one-season crop, whereas greenhouse-grown cannabis is a year-round crop. So functionally, I think we're going to see more growth facilities, whether it be greenhouses. Some larger communities are really counting on it to revitalize their mill districts, for example. In Holyoke and in East Hampton, that's where they're looking to direct it.
So is there a certain amount that somebody can, is there a limit on how much they can grow? And who's going to be responsible for policing the facilities after they're opened?
So I believe there is a limit in the state regulations, and I do not, off the top of my head, remember what it is, but it is fairly generous. To the extent that this is a zoning bylaw, the zoning enforcement officer will have the first crack at this. So we start with the proposition: the planning board has no enforcement authority. We don't get badges. So the zoning enforcement officer is our enforcement arm for zoning enforcement. The Cannabis Control Commission presumably will have ongoing jurisdiction, just as the Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission does. So I'm not sure what they are going to be policing. And to the extent that anyone operates beyond their license, I would assume that the police department would probably get involved. So there are at least 3 jurisdictions which may have some say in that.
Any Board of Health?
I believe the Board of Health is adopting its own regulations on this, which do not require town meeting approval. So they'll be involved in it, although I would defer, I'm not as familiar with their jurisdiction, so I don't know exactly what they have a say over.
Thank you. Going to be an interesting discussion, I think, next week.
It will be, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, it's a multi-page bylaw because it's covering a lot of ground. And so there's a lot of detail in here, and partly we want to avoid getting lost in the weeds of the detail and getting focused on the real goal here. So one question that has come up is what would happen if we don't pass it? What would happen, sort of a worst case scenario, if we don't pass the adult use bylaw, but we also don't extend the moratorium? And that's a bit of a gray area, but we do have, first of all, the state regulations do say that for zoning purposes, commercial cultivation of cannabis is not considered to be agriculture, which means it does not fall within the agricultural exemption to Chapter 48, the zoning law. So presumably, we do have commercial site plan approval. We do have a number of tools in place. We also have a bylaw that is written in such a way that if the use is not allowed, it is by definition prohibited. So I think we have time to work on this and get it right without feeling pressured. Any questions on the big one here?
It's a big one, all right.
So we actually have to, yes, that's Article 13, which will have 2 pieces. One is in amending the table of uses, and one is creating the bylaw itself. There is a question over there. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Jana Aldrich, 1 Morningstar Drive. Could you just clarify the meeting that's being held on Tuesday night and what that will entail?
On Tuesday night, the planning board is having the formal public hearing, which we are required to have on every zoning article that is on the agenda. So we're basically going to roll it out, go through pretty much what I just went through, and take public comments. At this juncture, we're having the public hearing and we'll have to take a vote on it just before town meeting. We don't have a lot of flexibility to change anything in the bylaw. Since the bylaw's already been printed and the warrant has been posted, any tweaks to the bylaw will have to be made by motion to amend on town meeting floor. But otherwise, it is just a formal requirement. We have a meeting, a public hearing, basically before every town meeting that has a zoning article on it. Now, there are also 2 articles Articles 14 and 15, which are proposed amendments to the general bylaw. And we just got some comments back from town council on those, and I have not had a chance to digest those comments yet. So basically the idea is to have a belt and suspenders approach, amend the zoning article and amend the town bylaw. Zoning doesn't really talk about how you can conduct yourself as an individual. The general bylaw does. That's what it's supposed to cover. I apologize, I wasn't actually planning to be here tonight, but I learned at the last minute that our chairman is away. So we may have some tweaks going in on the general bylaws. That's 14 and 15. Those will not be taken up at the public hearing because they're not zoning articles, and so a public hearing is not required under Chapter 48.
So when they say penalties for consumption of marijuana in public places, does that involve now the police?
I would presume so.
It's going to affect our infrastructure of the police department, I would assume.
I won't argue with you.
Certainly, could you come to the mic, please?
Michelle Morris Friedman, 45 Roosevelt Street. I just have a question because this says marijuana or THC essentially, and there are a lot of products right now that are cannabinoids that don't include THC that a lot of people are taking for arthritis or for pain relief, either in drop form or ointment, and I didn't know if an exception could be made for those. I could imagine somebody taking their little dropper of cannabinoid because their knee is acting up and getting stopped by the police. The cannabinoids do not have anything that gets you high in them.
I believe.
Well,
Prescription, aren't they those?
anything that's related to medical marijuana was authorized under a separate bylaw.
Right, but you can now buy these ointments and tinctures from herbalists or people that aren't medical marijuana dispensaries. And they're selling a lot of them to older people, who aren't interested in the drug effects.
Okay, so first of all, zoning has no impact.
Right, but I meant for the board or whoever's addressing 15.
And the second thing is this is designed to authorize the sale of the products that are governed under the authority of the
Right.
Cannabis Control Commission.
Okay.
So if there is something being sold that is not under the jurisdiction of Cannabis Control, it is not affected by this bylaw, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know the people who sell it have permissions and they have certain restrictions. I don't know if they're following those rules.
It may come under the guideline of public health.
Okay.
But if it's got, it's just CBD, it doesn't have any THC in it, so.
Correct.
So it
But,
would be
but, but,
outside.
but somebody who's like law enforcement might not realize that it doesn't have any THC in it. I guess you could always challenge them legally afterward, but, there's this whole class of compounds that doesn't quite fit into that paragraph. Yeah.
So I think that covers everything there.
Go ahead.
Just so people can hear at home, has the planning board considered limiting the number of retail marijuana licenses to the 2 that the select board voted on in an effort to decouple the marijuana licenses from the liquor licenses in town, rather than 20%?
Right, we did talk about that, and the issue is they are coupled already. That the requirement is that a community provide at least 20%, provide for marijuana permitting up to at least 20% of the licensed liquor sales establishments. And so that coupling has already been created by the state. And the reason we wanted to stay at 20% versus 2 is that if the town license quota changed, either up or down, we would be out of, well, not if it went down, but if it changed and went up, and we were limited to 2 rather than 20%, we would be out of compliance with the state requirements unless and until the next town meeting, by a 2/3 majority, changed 2 to 3. And that just seemed like a bookkeeping headache to have it coupled. Actually, by saying 2, you are coupling it. So that's why we thought that if we just said 20%, right now I think the number works out to like 1.4, you round up, you get 2. It would be a while before that would creep up to 3, I would imagine. But if we're stuck at 2 and we don't know, we're not aware that you have issued a new license or requested a new license, it just creates a period of vulnerability where we could stand accused of denying access. So that's why we went to the float rather than the fixed number.
I guess my understanding was that the 2 that we voted to implement was a way of decoupling them, so that way we could do that by way of town meeting vote and a ballot vote, as well as a select board vote. And then if we chose to, say, add another 10 liquor licenses, that 2 would still stand.
Well, yes, but that's not going to happen by the select board vote or the planning board vote.
Right, town meeting.
You have to go through the exercise because Hadley did adopt or did vote by over 50% for legalization of adult use marijuana. The only way to prohibit or limit establishments is the way South Hadley did it. You have to have a town meeting article to limit or prohibit, followed by a town-wide ballot vote to follow the same language. So if that's where you want to go, that's not what's before us here. And going with 20% or 2 doesn't accomplish that by itself.
I think that's what we thought we were doing as a board, and that was our intention when we voted 6 months ago. That's why I
Then
I guess lack of communication between them.
okay, I would defer to David Nixon on that as to what the proper way to. I think you have to go through a different route to impose that kind of limit.
Does anybody have any other questions? I think that wraps up what we'll be speaking about next week at town meeting. That'll be next Thursday, October 18th at 7 p.m. here. Thank you to those that listened at home. And thank you for those that came tonight. We appreciate it. And see you next week, I hope. Thank you. I would love to keep it this time, an hour, less than an hour. Good night.